And I want to welcome everybody to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Coelho, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. And we do this through online interviews and presentations by guest speakers such as Suzanne Price tonight, classes, and also study groups. And we draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science and consciousness and spirituality and philosophy. And we've been doing this since 2003, but not until 2019 did we begin recording our presentations. And so our video recordings, I think this is the 86th or 7th, something like that, that we've recorded. And our recordings are viewable through our website, caritascenter.org. Just go to the video library tab. And on our YouTube channel, which is Caritas Consciousness Project, as a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. So if you enjoy our presentations and would like to support this program, please make a donation on any page of our website or become our member on our membership page. Memberships start at $10 a month, so it's pretty affordable. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. Formerly trained as a cultural anthropologist and communications professional, Suzanne has become a spiritual scientist and quantum science researcher who has investigated the bridge between universal spirituality and the quantum worlds for more than 15 years. Her academic credentials include a BA magna cum laude in anthropology from the University of Wyoming and an MA in Cultural Anthropology from Tulane University in New Orleans, with a keen interest in world religions and transformative cultural values. So welcome, Suzanne, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening.
Thank you, Gloria. I'm very glad to be here, and hello to everyone. Thank you very much, Gloria, for having me here this evening. And I'm going to start out by saying this talk is about understanding afterlife communications. It is a more of a scientific twist to it and a personal view, but there's really more to it. This is not just about afterlife communication. It's about all kinds of consciousness communication, including paranormal. This is not an exclusive list here. This is just a few examples of that kind of communication, and it includes after-death communication and near-death experiences, as well as meditation, transformative experiences, and so forth. Now, what I want to present to you, which is a different point of view than you have probably heard before, I'm coming from a quantum information science viewpoint. And actually right now they're not including consciousness, but I see it as that because I believe consciousness is primary rather than material. And I'm interested in starting with the frequencies of the primordial source, which we know as transcendent light and sound. And I believe that it is all vibratory in nature, all of life is, and is in resonance continuously. So I have come up in the last 15 years, I've been studying the bridge between what I call universal spirituality and the physical world, the material world. And this is what I've come up with. I have concluded, and I'm calling this trans-dimensional string theory. It's all about vibrating waves or strings of light. And it is characterized by information encoded light. I will be explaining this, and the harmonic synchronization of these that are forming our world. What is happening here, I believe, is a two-way communication between us as humans and these worlds, both physical and non-physical, which some people have termed the information highway. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to give you a little outline first so you know what's coming up. First, I want to point out to you that there has continued to be a schism between consciousness studies and material or physical studies. And this has been going on for over 400 years. It probably started when science was just peeking around the corner with Galileo and Kepler and those people. And the church decided, the Vatican decided, well, you guys can do that, because remember, they put Galileo under house arrest, but we're going to, this is our territory and that's yours. And this is the way it's been going ever since then. And right now, in our scientific standard paradigm, the requirements are that it be physical, that one can experiment with it and verify it. And so this is where the rub comes in, because of course, in the invisible worlds, at least right at the moment, our technology is not allowing us to verify this with experimentation, at least not that much. They're trying. So now there have been various unifying consciousness theories that have been proposed out there. One of the greats is David Bohm, a physicist, and he came up with the idea of the hollow movement, which is the communication between humans and the higher worlds of consciousness and the higher worlds of consciousness and humans. And I believe now that the trans-dimensional string theory that I am proposing could possibly be the beginning of bridging the two. And I'm going to start out talking about particles and waves after I finish telling you what my outline is here. But first, I thought this quote was very appropriate, because when we're talking about quantum, we're talking about things we cannot see. Not really. We can study them like they do at CERN with squiggles, when they're smashing protons together and then they're analyzing the patterns of the so-called particles or their tracks that they leave. It's very, very small. We can't really see it, but we can sort of view it by where it goes and the effects of it. So Niels Bohr, who is one of the greats in physics and in quantum mechanics, said this: everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. If quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet. Because basically, at least in our own human senses, there's nothing there. Now, in addition to looking at the science, and this is included in it, I'm going to be explaining a few things about what I think is human quantum potential. And this starts out with the physical and spiritual consciousness dimensions. And I'm going to try and correlate these conscious dimensions with some personal experiences I had recently when my husband suddenly died and communicated with me. And I'm going to show you examples on each level of the kinds of things you might expect. And then I'm going to talk about how the human body can access these higher spiritual conscious states, such as through chakras, the heart, the brain, the DNA connections, and the role of the pineal gland, which is very significant, because I believe that the whole human body is capable of receiving, storing, and sending these subtle messages. And so after this, I'm going to as on a personal note, I would like to share with you some methods that I think are worthwhile to try and access these higher consciousness dimensions. Some breathing techniques, some prerequisites you might try, heart math, intentioning, visualization and dreaming, meditation, contemplation techniques, the hemisync binaural beat, remote viewing, and even some out of body travel kinds of movements that some people are able to do. So let me start with this. One of my favorite people is Nikola Tesla, the great inventor of the 20th century. He's often quoted as saying, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So true, frequency and vibration. And he came up with a resonance theory where he proposed an electromagnetic view unifying the material and spiritual origins of the universe. He called this, it was kind of a material, a luminiferous ether. And he said that it was a unified, dynamic, and undifferentiated field of time, space, and energy at all physical levels. And it also joined states of excited energy bridging multi-realities. That's quite a mouthful to take in. But most important, I think, is that he viewed matter as concentrated light, whose formation resulted from resonant processes in space propagated by the interaction of wave structures. So I am going on some of these assumptions as I'm talking along here. I'm saying, and I'll be repeating a few of these things because my goal is to give you the full picture so that you see all of the parts together integrated. I think everything is energy, vibration, and consciousness in a dynamic wave interaction resonance. And this resonance carries encoded information in light strings. We might call this the collective unconscious, the mind of God, the force. I prefer to call it innate intelligence. And within this, we are entangled with all of it on what I call the information highway that David Bohm came up with. If we tune our focus and brainwaves into a signal line, we may be able to begin this communication. And because what it's doing is it's harmonizing with subtle wave frequencies. In other words, we create the frequencies that match those, at least in similar octaves, to the conscious waves of the subtle planes. And part of this, it's very important that we keep our spiritual eye open. I'll be talking about the pineal gland here in a bit. I do believe also that there are different kinds of information that can be accessible from these many states of consciousness. And you can have more than one kind going on at all times. But the principle behind this is brain wave synchronization or phase coherence with that which is octaves above us. Laude will explain this a little bit more. First, what is string theory? Some of you may have heard of it. It is an alternative to particle physics. We'll look at that. And it involves vibrating strings, I want to add, of polarized light strings. These can be loops. They also have dimensions curled within them, and people have proposed anywhere from 4 to 26 of these things. One thing we do know is that quarks and electrons are one-dimensional strings. That's where they've started. And there is one lady, a physicist, who has at least mathematically proved that there are 12 dimensions that could be curled up inside these strings. Michio Kaku, who is a very famous physicist, summarized it rather well, I thought, when he stated, in string theory, all particles are vibrations on a tiny rubber band, and physics is the harmonies on the string, chemistry is the melodies we play on vibrating strings, the universe is a symphony of strings, and the mind of God is cosmic music resonating in 11-dimensional hyperspace. Of course, I just said 12 has been proven already since he developed that quote. Now, most of us tend to think of things as composed of atoms, and atoms composed of other particles, subatomic particles, and so on. There is what you call a particle-wave duality, which is a bit confusing. This is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle at play, because when we try to measure what we call a wave, it becomes a particle. It is frozen in time. Otherwise, it remains as a wave, which I am now suggesting, but we look at it as as, shall I say, ropes of strings. This is a depiction of the way it's normally seen. I don't know if you can see. Can you see on the screen my pointer? Yes, no? Yeah, you can. Okay. This is the Niels Bohr model that they started out with at the beginning of the 20th century. So you have a nucleus consisting of protons and neutrons, and then you've got electrons. The electrons have a negative charge, the protons a positive, and so forth. Now we're taking a look at this because that's just somebody's imaginative depiction of it. It really doesn't look like that, but that's what most of us think. Now we're suggesting that these are vibrating light strings, okay, or loops, and that these strings can combine together and be curled within photons. This is a representative of a photon and the light strings that are combining, becoming more complex. When it becomes these combined together in various ways to form an atom, the atom has this structure, they say. It's a torus configuration. It looks like this. And although I couldn't get the animated version available up here, couldn't figure it out, it does rotate. The energy goes up and around and down and around, kind of like this. And some people think that it is all one thing, one force that has a positive and then neutral and then negative, and it goes round and round. It's just changing its charge as it is moving or vibrating, which is an interesting idea, I think. This is a model of the elementary or subatomic particles. There's forces and matter particles involved here. I won't go into it too much, but to say, here we have the Higgs boson, which is one of the most recent discoveries. And I will say that I have seen an article in the last year in which CERN, the Hadron Collider in France and Switzerland, where they're smashing together protons to try and get deeper and deeper into what is the bottom line, of the quantum world. And they have smashed together the Higgs, and it has revealed that there are two muons here, and a photon involved in it. So it is a complex quantum particle wave or string, if you will. This, of course, we all know as the periodic table of elements in our world. They've kept on adding more and more in a sophisticated way. But what I want to tell you about this, it all starts with the simplest and ends with the most complex. Hydrogen is the simplest one to study. It has the atomic number 1. How about that? And the majority of the universe does consist in hydrogen. It's the most common element there is. What I want you to understand is that all of these elements have a signature, a vibratory signature. I know of a young man who is doing his PhD, a dissertation on the configurations and the sounds of each of these. In other words, each one has a different vibratory sound or complex of sounds. And also they have a signature, a visual signature, and they're geometric in form. So I'm going to show you an example that I came up with. These are complex. These aren't the atoms, but to give you an idea of the visual of an ohm, it's this kind of a scalar ripple effect. This is a geometric form of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony Ode to Joy. This is the science of semantics, which is a fascinating one. So what I want to say is it has a audio signature and a visual signature. And combined, think of what that is like when we really have a complex form. So, and also this person's dissertation, they raised the sound 40 octaves so that we could hear it in our range. And here is our range right here. Now this is an electromagnetic spectrum. We are in this narrow little band right here, and we only see 4 to 5% of actually what is. And the sounds, well, I'm not quite sure where those go, but I do know that here are the radio frequencies. And radio frequencies are amplified so that we can see them. So in other words, there is a whole wide world of things that we can't hear and can't see. And out here, we have gamma rays. Then we have what's not on the chart, are cosmic rays. And we know scientists are now talking about 10 to the 35th. That's 35 zeros. Small. Okay, and that's really small. And we really can't test with these that much, but they can virtually through math figure out how to do that. And so further, what is important to know is that these two things, light and sound, are measured differently, and that is a problem. To give you an idea here, an octave of visible light is 40 octaves from the middle audio octave, the middle one, which is V middle C, I guess, and 46 octaves up from the alpha brainwave octaves. You will note that all of this is kind of measured in these frequencies. Tight is high and longer is the lower frequencies. I want to explain to you about how these octaves work. Some of you who know about music will understand this a little bit better, but an octave, and I think this is a way to measure it rather than in angstroms and hertz. An octave is the interval of 8 pitches on a musical scale, okay? Now, in music, this is middle C right here. This is lower C and higher C. An octave will occur at 2 times the frequency of the note. Okay, so this frequency, this one here is twice as much as this one. And this one, come on, get away. This one down here is 2 times less. So we have, for example, if one note has a frequency of 440 hertz, the note an octave above it, this one here, would be 880. And the one below it would be 220. So you can see how this adds up quickly. When we have 7,200, which is somebody's guess at this, 7,200 octaves beyond the human range, which we cannot see or hear without help, and our technology is not there yet. Let me explain to you a little bit about the information highway, which is maybe a different way that you ever heard about it before. I will give you the best I can based on the latest information from spiritual and, shall I say, academic sources. And I'm looking at this via encoded light streams, okay? First, we start out with what science calls a singularity, okay? This is the Big Bang Theory and all that. There is a force that is some kind of force that has created this universe of ours, including us. I call it an innate intelligence, which is all consciousness. This consciousness is expressed in light and sound frequencies, starting with those that we cannot see and cannot hear. And the way that this is described, it's dark light. Can't see it, can't know it. It's transcendent light. As it unwinds, if I could use that phrase, it comes down to us, it creates dark energy. This energy is like electromagnetic, which is probably at the basis of everything there is. Anyway, it, as I'm told, interacts with dark matter to begin to create and weave the world below that we start with as plasma, called the fourth state of matter, and then into matter, which we know is liquid, solid, and gas. Now, scientists right now are studying dark energy and dark matter. They don't know anything about dark light. That hasn't been mentioned, but by a few people as speculative at best. We hopefully will begin to understand this within the next decade, how this actually works, because we have a super duper telescope out there called the James Webb, and it is sending back some marvelous pictures of the universe and the depths of when it started. We're looking back into all of time to see where it all began and finding a lot of surprises along the way. The information highway is analogous to a radio and sending out signals and waves to us, where we pick up on our, or the station, and we pick up on our radio. Okay, and we can dial it, we can tune it, and we can also amplify the sound so we can hear it. So we've got signal lines. This is the light strings complexity of, they call it electromagnetic bundles, that comes down to us that we eventually can detect. And it has two aspects: the frequency, the waves or cycles, as I said, per second, and then the amplitude. This is important because we might be able to tune into the frequency, but if the amplitude of the message is not strong enough, we may not receive it, and vice versa. If we have the ability to signal another, maybe our amplitude or signal strength is not strong enough to be able to reach the other side. Now, what we're trying to do here is create a synchronous vibration or resonance. That's the information exchange that, or the communication that we're seeking through harmonic octave scales. That is, if we have an octave that is say we have a chord on one octave, what we're looking for, that's the message. We're looking for it on a higher level, the same chord, but it's twice as many or however many octaves higher. That's what I mean by harmonic, and that's what I mean by synchronous also. We're also dealing with principles such as entanglement and superposition. Entanglement is in communication or connection of a quantum system, a particle, regardless of distance. In other words, they're testing this now, and they're successful at two different subatomic particles, like an electron or some other quark, at great distances. In other words, what one does, the other one does too. There's a communication. If one changes, the other changes. Pretty miraculous, isn't it? And then superposition is the ability of a quantum system to be in multiple states at the same time until it's measured. So in other words, there's a quantum potential that maybe when we measure it, it becomes one thing, but it still retains the potential to be something else. That's what I'm thinking it's like with an atom that's in the torus configuration of positive and negative, exchanging in a situation where we can't even measure it yet. But that's what some people think it's doing. So here's more about entanglement. This phenomena occurs when a group of particles are generated, interact, or share spatial proximity. And the quantum state of each particle of the group cannot be described independently of the state of the others. So they're in sync. They're in harmonic synchronization, okay? It doesn't matter how far apart that they are, they're situated. And the transmission of the information appears to be faster than the speed of light. That's what they're discovering. It's immediate. And we know that the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. And it takes 8 seconds for the sun to hit our planet here, thereabouts. This quantum entanglement is quite the phenomena, and it has been demonstrated experimentally with things like photons, neutrinos, electrons, and molecules as large as buckyballs. Let me show what that's like. This is a complex molecule called the Buckminster fullerene, and it has 60 carbon atoms to it. It looks like this. It looks like a soccer ball. Interesting, isn't it? And some of the people that are doing it, I mean, it's phenomenal what they're able to do. But in entanglement, this buckyball will do the same thing as one infinitely away. The gentlemen who are doing this, I thought it was worth telling you who they are. They just won a Nobel Prize last year for their experiments with entangled photons. And they are actually pioneers in the quantum information science and technology field. And I feel I'm there somewhere. What they're working with are the known phenomena or the subatomic particles. They don't call them strings, I don't think, but they're not dealing with consciousness per se, which I believe that they should. So this is a unique aspect of my research. Another person I want to point out to you in this whole thing is a gentleman, he's recently deceased, physicist Claude Swanson. He came up with something called the synchronized universe model, where he said the key is interaction of particles across great distances in times, which I've just talked about. Actually, this is not a new idea. Way back in 1945, two other very famous physicists, Richard Feynman and John Wheeler, came up with something called the round trip photon. Pardon me, talking too fast. And they demonstrated that a photon here and a photon in the distant universe were communicating almost instantaneously. They proved it, and they were awarded a Nobel Prize for it as well. That is not something that is easily known. And they said here that it was electrons doing it. The zigzag of local electrons is really communication between it and distant matter via photons. How about that? Interesting, isn't it? And if you want to understand a little bit more about how this works in creating layers of consciousness that are coherent, because I think when we talk about layers of consciousness, like the emotional, the causal, the mental, the soul plane and stuff, there is a coherence to this level of vibration. So we know that, I'm going to read this to you so you get it. Photons compose a 0 point of energy in space, an infinite exchange of energy. They call this the photon pulse. And that photons are sent and received when two electrons are coupled, that's entangled, together creating a pulse in the fabric of space-time. These pulses create wave packets or wave trains or torsion waves. And when they do this, they can become phase locked. They become in sync or synchronous as I call it. And they form arrays and geometrical structures. When they're out of phase, they can supposedly, they're postulating they can create like parallel universes. And this is like sheets of paper. So that again, the key to this phenomena and subtle energy is the synchronization of vibration, which we call phase coherence, which can provide access to other dimensions and realms. And here you have he illustrated this without reading all the rest of this. Sheets of paper, which are like layers of consciousness. This is how we could visualize it, or also layers of reality, different parallel universes. Now I want to talk to you about what are these phase coherent consciousness layers? What are they like? We call them dimensions. And I would like to say up front for everyone to know that this is what I believe. Everybody has their own concept of heaven and so forth, depending on their faith or their way of looking at things. But I believe there is no way to define a reality that is independent of the way we choose to look at it. And so that's something to take into consideration. I'm looking at consciousness as one kind of reality here. And this is a derivative of Ekankar. This is a spiritual path that is derived from basically the ancient Sanskrit and Hindu. I tend to like it. It's simple, but there are many versions of this. So this is just an example. You may know of your own way of looking at these layers. It starts with physical, astral or emotional, causal or memory, mind, and there are different layers within each of these. The etheric, which is kind of a transitional consciousness state. And then the upper worlds, which are all composed of light and sound. I would say this is bright light, and eventually it becomes this thing called dark light, which it's almost impossible to fathom. And it can be known. Travelers of the far country have told us of this, the way that this works, and that we can use different words to connect with it, or phrases of words, and there are variations on this. We can also hear this with our inner ears, if you will. It could be that in the upper worlds of the high spiritual planes, you hear this as music or humming or whirlwinds or something like that. I'm going to show you a few examples of it. So, and about consciousness, I'd like to say this. It really has these aspects, all of them. yes, all of them are within us already, but it is a question of realization and practice. And I do believe that the human body, every part of it, in our consciousness, has the ability to communicate beyond the veil at every level. But it's a question of our spiritual unfoldment in the practice of different techniques to realize that. We can have multiple movements of these awarenesses in any spiritual experience. And if it happens to be the dreaming kind, I think we have our own visual symbols as well. And that's why it's important, I think, to pay attention to dreams and such, maybe daydreams too, as an important way to discern what are our symbols and patterns. One more point I'd like to make is that communications seek the greatest level of resonant coherence, or I call harmonic synchronization. An example of this is my deceased husband was trying to communicate with me in a very physical way, like knocking on walls, soothing my arms, even tapping my forehead, wake up, And I was, through all the experiences that I was receiving, and there were many different kinds, I was trying to communicate with him telepathically with my mind, because this was happening at 3 a.m. in the morning. I was having a hard time waking up. But then I discovered that, you see, he was communicating in the physical and he needed a physical response. So I finally spoke aloud and said what I needed to say to him. And after that, that made the communication work, because he was operating from probably the astral level. And because they have to rev down. In order to communicate with us, they have to come down to a level where we can meet them, you see, in our physicality. After that, the communication stopped. The communication was made. A couple references I'd like to point out to you that may be of interest are, first of all, a couple of books by Ward Barkefer, who lives in the Denver Littleton area. He's written Secrets of Life After Death. His wife tragically died after 38 years of marriage, and they were very close. And she began communicating with him. And this was a very valuable, practical information that this man gleaned in his relationship with his deceased wife, which tells us a lot about how things operate on at least the astral levels as people or individuals are trying to communicate with us in the physical. And I learned a lot about that from him. And then another person of interest who's written books is Roberta Grimes. You can see by the titles that she's showing us, do not be afraid. This is a fun thing. Fun of dying and fun of staying in touch. And one of the things I got out of it was she categorized the different ways that people on the other side, or entities of any kind, are trying to communicate with us through physical expressions, things like electricity, scent, sounds, thoughts, dreams, even synchronicities or coincidences, through light forms and visions and other manifestations like that, and also through soul travel. So she was very helpful as well. Now, what are these afterlife dimensions and communications? I'm going to give you just a very few of those I've experienced with my deceased husband, who he died a couple of years ago, and then about 2 months afterwards, for the next 2 months, we had various kinds of communications. First of all, I could very, very well relate to Ward Barkefer and Roberta Grimes' descriptions, because I kept getting knocks on the wall, on the door, lights going on and off, doorbells ringing, my phone going off when it had, ringing when it had been turned off, and all that kind of stuff is very typical. And we tend to think of that as, oh, the poltergeists are at it again. Well, here's a picture. I'd like to tell you a story of someone else experiencing something like that with him. A couple that I know were walking down the street after dark, after dinner, and as they passed by a street light, it went out. And because Lindsay, my husband who deceased, because he had died recently, they said, oh, that must be Lindsay turning the lights out. He was on their mind, right? They continued their walk, and then 15 minutes later, they came back, and the street light was still out. So the man said, well, Lindsay, aloud, he said, well, if you're still around, make the light go back on. And it did. And so they laughed and they said, oh, that was Lindsay doing it, which is kind of, you wonder if it's a coincidence, but I think that there's something more to it. They were communicating in their thoughts and feelings, I think. Another way we look at the astral is through this image here. The source of psychic phenomena can be reached by this astral plane and most occult sciences. And what you see there are blue gold light sparkly bodies, just or very similar to this. And I will tell you a story with Lindsay again. He deceased in the early morning. His sister was there and was going to call her daughter, or Lindsay's niece. And before she could tell her that Lindsay had passed away unexpectedly, and no one was expecting this to happen, the daughter said, oh, Mom, well, I had a dream with Lindsay. And Lindsay was dancing around in this blue sparkly body, and he was very happy about it. And he was dancing and jumping up for joy and all that stuff. And she said, I didn't, I realized that he was in another body form, but that there was an exchange there. And then when she finished describing this, her mother said, well, Lindsay just died. And so he has had a communication with you, my dear daughter. And I thought that was really kind of cool because it illustrated that he was in the astral plane in exhibiting or expressing in his astral form. I've had this kind of experience as well. And I would like to tell you one way that he communicated with me that I knew for sure it was him. Okay, before he died, he had been diagnosed with colon cancer. He had part of it removed, had a colonoscopy bag, so to speak. It was distressing. He was taking chemo therapy and such. And because he was getting up in the night to take care of this colostomy bag, we decided that he could sleep in a guest room because it was disturbing our sleep, both of us, and he didn't want to do that. So sometimes when he felt well enough, he would go to work. And so he would come in from the room, and as I was sleeping, he would gently take my foot under the covers and he would move it back and forth gently like this to wake me up, which I thought was really very sweet and considerate. And what was happening in the middle of the night after he passed away, at least a half a dozen times, he would come in and do it. And I finally realized, yes, this is you, because you and I are the only ones that know that you would do that with me when you were waking me up. So that was kind of cool. Now, another layer of consciousness that we can get some information about is called the causal. And this is the plane of past memories, karmic patterns, and so on. And all of us probably have had these kinds of dreams before. Some people, many more than others. Well, with Lindsay, he told me, I had a dream with him. Let's put it this way. I had a dream with him in which he and I were viewing a slideshow. And it was a slideshow with maps on it of Europe. And he was pointing, he says, well, we were here in Italy and France and Switzerland, and on he went. And that was how I knew that we had shared lifetimes together before. So that was another example. Then there is the mental plane, which is more mind telepathy, thoughts exchanged. It's also the plane of most mental teachings, aesthetics, philosophies, conventional religions, and including cosmic consciousness. Now, the example that I have here for you is that it was mind telepathy. It also involves some other things. For example, we had a celebration of life for Lindsay in Flagstaff, Arizona at the Lowell Observatory, where he was very fond of that. Then we went down to Phoenix, where we had been living for a long time, and I stayed with his best friend. It was 118 degrees outside, so we were hanging out at the swimming pool, and we went to we got in the pool and we're hanging on the edge, and I'm next to his best friend. I'll just call him Julian. And Julian, unfortunately, had just lost his wife 2 months prior to COVID complications. She had been ill with other things and had caught COVID and didn't make it. and he was still grieving. And so as I'm hanging on the pool next to him, I see a little bit of a vision of Lindsay and also Julian's deceased wife. Her name was Kim. And Lindsay was telepathically telling me what Kim, his wife, was saying. So it went like this. Julian didn't believe in all this kind of stuff. So Kim was telling Lindsay what to tell me to tell her husband, Julian. And it was just very simple. It's just like, I'm here, honey, and I love you. And, maybe we'll be together again in the other worlds. But there was a telepathic communication going on there. Another layer, which is a little bit more nebulous, is an intuition kind of a layer, which is between the lower worlds of form and the upper worlds of no form. So just remember, again, we're in the worlds of form, and there's even forms on the mental plane if you visit there. They're all, as it goes up through the emotional causal to mental, it's higher and finer vibrations until it's wispy. And the intuitive plane is very, very wispy. It's the last one before you hit the invisible planes, where all you can know it by is light and sound in ever more brilliant degrees. So what is it like here? There really isn't anything to know. You might see a bright light of blue or white or some other color. You might just have a sixth sense of just knowingness. Some people do report that they can see with their inner eye geometric forms. So that's what that one is like, and I don't have an example of that to share with Lindsay. But I do have one for the soul plane. This is the world of light and sound, as I've said. Its inner sound is a single note of a flute, which you hear with your inner ears. I have visuals here, but there really isn't anything visual. What I can tell you is that most people who have dreams of flying are flying on the soul plane, and that they're just getting a visual expression of the fact that they're doing that. But I have one example for you, and I call this the cameo effect. Well, it's like this. The clouds part, the light's in the middle, and you may see a picture of your loved one. What happened to me was I was in a dream state, but a very light dream state. And I was looking through this configuration here. It was kind of like a tunnel, a gate to a tunnel. And in it, I saw Lindsay. And I saw Lindsay doing exactly what I had done at home, which is I had a mantelpiece and I had a picture of him and me on it. And for a long time, I would go by in the mornings and I would look at the picture and I would think of him. Well, there he was in a mock-up, like where we lived, the very same thing. And I knew it was him in a younger form. And he was there looking at the same picture. This is what Ward Barkefer also reported with his wife. Often our loved ones will mock up consciously a comfortable place that they're very used to living on the other side, and that's that. But what happened to me was he turned around and he saw me, and I saw him, and there was a soul-to-soul contact there, and that was very special indeed for me. So the end of some of these, but I do want to tell you that in these upper planes, it is all about brighter and brighter light that we really can't look at with our physical eyes. It's all about symphonic sounds of the woodwinds, the bagpipes, the brass, the violins. The orchestral music is the closest we can come to that. Sometimes also the whirlwind, like a tornado, is also experienced with your inner ears. So that's a little bit about those. Now I am going to turn my attention to the quantum potential that we all have to do this. We have the ability in our bodies, our brains, our cells, and our DNA to receive, store, and send subtle messages. And this has been dumbed down in humans. We can transcend to these levels through various vibratory techniques, as I have mentioned about harmonic synchronization on the scales of the octaves, if you choose to. A lot of this that I'm going to tell you, I'm not telling you references, but it has been tested. The human body, first of all, it's mostly empty space. It's like the great cosmos that we live in. And the body nucleus is encoded with the complete blueprint of life. It's highly ordered, complex arrays of protein crystal lattices. And these lattices can transfer electrical, magnetic, and bioacoustical information of photons. Remember, these photons are carrying coded information. And we do this via hexagonal water molecules. We are mostly water bodies. And this is highly, shall I say, transmittive. The human brain has the structure to receive energy patterns and process them holographically or in 3D. I think beyond that, I think we have the ability to go 4D, 5D, and beyond. These are as magnetic standing waves. So again, they can store, send, and receive coherent photons. Our thoughts themselves are actually clusters of photons. Also, the physical world, we can affect this by what they call the collapse of the wave function. In other words, our thoughts can change material reality, not only within our bodies, but outside of ourselves. Only a very few people know how to do this, but it's like, oh, with cancer, you can change the vibration of those cancer cells and cause them to become, to vibrate in harmony again. Not many of us can do that, but it is possible. We have what we can manifest quantum potential of any kind. Sounds fantastic because we haven't been told this before? Well, in my opinion, it's true. The human brain actually has two cerebral brains that are people call scalar wave generators. And this can be produced when they're operating in harmony, which sometimes they are not because we're emphasizing one to the detriment of the other. But this scalar wave energy is 5-dimensional. It's nonlinear in time and space. And it can travel faster than the speed of light. So remember too that the faster the frequency, the higher the dimension you can go. These are our capabilities. All the cells in our bodies, all 70 trillion of them, and there's 166 types, 70 trillion more or less. Each cell contains the information, the full physical information of the whole body. Do you believe that? Which is basically a flower of life template, the whole geometry of nature. And each cell, remember I've talked about the radio? Each cell is like a tiny radio capable of transmitting and synchronizing phase conjugation. It can change things. Again, it can store and receive information of photon energy in pattern arrays across different planes or dimensions. Our bodies are marvelous. And that's not where it stops, because it also applies to the double helix DNA molecule. It can do the same thing. It can do that with encoded information that it receives through its crown chakra. We're getting there. It has antenna for reception and transmission of frequencies. And scientists themselves have detected DNA and mitochondria in cells actually creating scalar waves. Vibratory states of the human consciousness. Now, how does this work? We're going back a little bit to the chakras, if you believe in that. These are energy vortexes in the body. The physical, the astral, the mental's physical, emotional, the heart center, which can combine them all, and the spiritual centers, the third eye here. And we're actually operating from a soul body that is probably not fully integrated into the body itself. It's operating from above. Many people have different versions of this. I've heard it everything from 7, 9, 12, 14, up to 22, and now I've heard recently 26. There are all these energy wheels that are working within our body on different levels. And corresponding with this are human electromagnetic fields. These are called shields that correspond to these different chakras. And these are for centers of transmission of the life force energy. They form part of the subtle bodies. They have gateways. They balance the body. They work with the glands and consciousness, spectrums of light, and so forth. They're all very important. And we're actually receiving information through the crown chakra into the pineal gland and the spiritual eye. All this energy is distributed throughout our meridians and gateways in our bodies. The most important ones of these are the pineal gland. This is called the crystal transducer. And here is a picture. It's kind of like a vortex like this. They call it the transcendental gateway. It is shaped and looks to some like a pine cone. And why do you think that is such an important visual for the Vatican? Because they know that this is the center of the spiritual life within the human brain. This is what it looks like. Here we have 528 hertz, which is known as the love vibration. This is the crown chakra visual. If we were to look at it, again, this is semantics, right? That's the pine cone visual. There's even crop circles that have shown that. Interesting, isn't it? Now, the pineal gland. This is our sleeping giant within us, and I'm going to emphasize it because it's very important. This is our sixth chakra and our spiritual eye that sees within, okay? Now here is a picture cross-section of that gland. Isn't it interesting that it looks just like the Egyptian eye of Horus? Because the Egyptians knew all about this. And that's why they so heavily use this symbol. That was their gateway to their version of the heavens and the spiritual worlds. Let's look at these. So this, they say, is the point of contact with the divine mind above. It operates as a crystalline computer because of what it's made of and how it operates. And its activation leads to higher realms of consciousness. Okay, now here is the cross-section again. The pituitary gland is right down here, the yellow X's. This is the negative contact point, which is a receiver and enables information to be passed to the cerebrum up here, okay? The pineal gland with a blue X is over here. It's the positive contact point. It acts as a neuroendocrine transducer, and it transmits information as signals via the hypothalamus gland to direct the pituitary gland. This is how they work, the positive and negative parts of that gland. So here you have the corpus callosum. Here's the hypothalamus and the thalamus here within the brain. How this works is really interesting. Both of these glands need to vibrate in unison, which is achieved by meditation and relaxation. So when the correct relationship is established with your ego, they say, and the pineal gland, a magnetic field is created. This is the creative field. And you're focusing here on the midway point between the two of these glands. This is the spiritual eye. And what can happen when you successfully do that? And some of us doing it automatically, we don't even know it sometimes. The creative mind will visualize a form, and the heart will feel and give life to that form. And then these thoughts and feelings are springboards for creative manifestation. But if doubt enters into it, what happens is there is a biochemical reaction signal that sends to the neurons to block the pineal and pituitary gland communications, and it doesn't work. So negativity that we live in as an environment is not doing our creativity any good, and it is diminishing the potential communications that we can have and the potential creativity that we can have. In addition to the pineal gland, there's a couple of other ones. Like I say, all these cells in the neurons all have possibilities of receiving the subtle vibrations, storing them, and sending them back. So we have astrocyte cells and we have pinealocyte cells in the pineal gland that have the ability to convert these electromagnetic frequencies into electrical currents and convey the signals to the cerebral cortex. And they function as crystals, like a radio receiver and transmitter. And so if we're clever and we succeed in stilling the cerebral cortex, we are able to access this subtler information that can help us, that comes from the higher realms of consciousness. An interesting thing has come to light here, and I'm going to read this to you. The pineal gland has been found to contain large numbers of calcite microcrystals that bear a striking resemblance to calcite crystals found in the inner ear. The ones found in the inner ear have shown to exhibit the quality of piezoelectricity. And if those are found in the pineal gland, they also have this quality, then this would provide a means whereby an external electromagnetic field might directly influence the brain. Think about this with regards to, we now have 5G. 5G and other things that people come up with have the ability to influence our pineal gland, and hence the information that we are receiving in our brains. To go on, people have been studying this. There's a positive side to it. The discovery of these microcrystals forming in the pineal gland has been documented, and it suggests that the energy belt that our planet and its sun are moving through right now, which has been called supernova remnants, because it's a higher energy, higher vibration, it's stimulating the body brain and to receive additional light frequencies. This is a good thing. This may be what people call in the shift our ability to start to have some paranormal abilities, such as telepathy. Some scientists have speculated the absorption of at least 2 more octaves of light waves frequencies through this changing Earth grid are happening right now, and will produce additional dimensional experiences, as I've said. It will advance humans toward multidimensionality, the next step in our evolution, and dramatically change our reality. It doesn't seem like that's doing it right now because we're in a transitional period. This has been discovered, I put their references down here, as early as 1999. It is not a fact that is well known, but as you can see by this photo, there are microcrystals on someone's pineal gland that have been developing. One of the dangers that we live with as growing up and now is the fact that fluoride deposits can happen on the pineal gland and block its functions. Here's the pineal gland. Here is some that were extrapolated here. And this is through the consumption of fluoridated water. That's why it's a good idea to drink pure water, right? Because it's called the calcifier of the divine gateway. As I said, these microcrystals have piezoelectric properties with excitability in the frequency range of mobile telecommunications. So scientists have theorized some time ago that interaction of these crystals with the global systems for mobile telecommunication waves could constitute a new mechanism of transduction on the pineal membrane. Draw your own conclusions. People ask me when I have talked about this before, what can we do if we're not sure, we want to clean or clear our pineal gland? So I have been given this by a spiritual guide as to how to do it. I've used it myself successfully. And I think it's a good idea just to share this information, how to clean or detoxify your pineal gland. Obtain 4 to 6 dried crushed red peppers or flakes and put them into the bottom of an 8-ounce glass. This is just your regular red peppers. They contain cayenne, right? Pour apple cider vinegar over the top of them, just enough to cover them, and it activates them. Let it seep until there's no apparent fizzing or movement. And I've done mine for like several hours. And then you can pour purified drinking water to taste in an 8-ounce glass or less, whatever you prefer. I fill mine up and I can't taste the vinegar in there at all. So this is one way, slowly over time, if you keep doing this, you will dissolve some of the fluoride crystals that might be on your pineal gland. And you may notice a difference after time. You feel sharper, clearer. It can happen. And now in the last part here, I would like to talk with you about some methods of communication at all levels. And these are just personal preferences that I think are pretty good. First, I start with prerequisites to enhance creative reception. And I start with get rid of the monkeys of the mind. And I'll tell you, I did work pretty hard to find these photos here of the monkeys of the mind that get us every time. I like this one down here because his smile and his reaching out reminds me of the phrase, never trust a smiling dog. Okay. But anyway, we got to get those out. And we have worries and we have stresses in our life. That's no good. We've got to rely on relaxation and breathing, calming music, exercise, bathing. Nature walks are good. Be in harmony with the electromagnetic frequencies of the planet and nature, and spending some alone time. Now I want to go back to breathing and give you 2 techniques that I've come across that are pretty good. Just remember when we're breathing deeply that we're actually oxygenating our whole bodies and our brains. That'll make us clear. So you start out with 3, with a deep breath in for 3 seconds and release. Then you go to, and you do that several times. Then you go to 6 seconds. You in breathe deeply, count to the count of 6, relax, and do that several times. And then try it with 9. Breathe into the count of 9 and then breathe out and do that. And you may find that you're feeling even more energized. That's good. Another way of doing this is, and do this exercise several times as well, and do it frequently. Breathe in your gut to the count of 3, so you can feel it in your gut, to the count of 3. And then breathe higher into your lungs to the count of 6. And then breathe once more into your brain, feel it at the top of your brain to the count of 9. Now that is an interesting exercise. 9 times important. Why? Because we are bombarded constantly by the sensory world and subtle and gross electromagnetic frequencies. It's a good idea to take a break from all of that stuff. And let me remind you that daydreaming and psychological distances allows our subconscious to find more remote associations between ideas. It can be very creative, but pressure and stress focuses on the left brain here and blocks out the bigger picture and the interaction of the 2 brains down the corpus callosum here. Unstructured time also allows us the ability to converse with others and exchange of ideas. And just the warmth of the human communication is sometimes very refreshing. What we're after here is to still the pool of the mind. If there's all kinds of stuff going on in here, how in the world are you going to receive and detect subtle electromagnetic information that is coming to us constantly? Speaks for itself. Now, some technologies that I think are pretty good. Heart math is one of them, and it's out there. And the reason that it is emphasized is that there is a heart brain. Did you know that there are 40,000 neurons in brain neurons in the heart, and they're constantly communicating? So imagine what it is like if your brain and your heart feeling part are not in agreement. You're going to have great conflicts. The idea behind this heart math technology is to balance this out with real-time feedback so that you can create a better balance. Or as they say down here, create higher coherence or synchronize the 2 brains, like I talked about before, as well as the pineal and the pituitary gland, the two parts of the brain and the 2 parts of the spiritual eye communicating well. This can bring about a balance and increase your intuitive intelligence and so on, make it easier to meditate, which will also help you. I have one technique here that I like a lot, using vortices. I have a blue and a gold one, but basically it's, let's see, what do they say it is? It is gold, blue, and silver. So gold, blue, and silver at the bottom. Couldn't find one like that, so I'm using blue. But anyway, this is where your intentioning can work for you. They're like radio signals. So you're not only protecting your mind field with this, but you're quiet alone, you're allowing the mind to blend the subconscious, the conscious, and soul minds together through this technique. So when you notice through your own activity that you're in a creative mood, you can focus on your heart center and choose positive thoughts, eliminating all negativity if you can. And then you visualize this and you work with your intention in a very focused, purposeful way. Okay. When you direct your energy to this, and when you're successful, those people who have recommended this say that negativity cannot penetrate your electromagnetic field. You have to consciously practice this. And if you're successful, you may be able to manifest something that you've been hoping for. It may not happen tomorrow, but it may happen later on when you least expect it. And one way to make that happen that I found is to put these thoughts, when you're creating them, on the back burner of the mind. You give it intensity and passion, you structure it, you intention it, and then you relax. That's putting it on the back burner. And you don't think about it. You don't hammer on it. Listen to your inner self and see if you get a message back if you're asking a question. When soul answers, it is a warm and loving feeling. There is a movement. If there's no movement, it's not working. But this is a technique to try, and some people have perfected it. Out there, we all know that there's all kinds of what I call soft technology. And the purpose of it is this harmonic synchronization I've been talking about, or brainwave coherence. Transcendental meditation, been around for ages, comes from the Vedic teachings, Swami Vivekananda, and many other yogis and masters. There is meditation versus contemplation. Meditation would be where you're receptive. Contemplation is you're taking a more active role in what it is you're creating. And there's probably a place in between the two that works. There are two techniques that are generally used in this kind of meditation: Neurot or visualization, and Surot or sound. I myself use both, although I have used sound techniques very successfully. I won't go into this too much, but one of the leaders here is Swami Vivekananda, who had a great influence by introducing the Western philosophies and so forth to the West at the turn of the 20th century. And he was acknowledged as a world leader at the World Parliament of Religions. And he came here on a 3-year tour to demonstrate to leading scientists of the West that the Eastern ways of looking at life, their religions, philosophy, and science, were in sync with what scientists at that time in the West were doing. And it was very true. Nikola Tesla was one of these, Lord Kelvin was one, and so was Walter Russell. Well, some of you may know of his work. He was a Renaissance man of a high order. And here he is. I won't go into that. One of my favorite ones from this yoga is from Kirpal Singh. Here he is. And he used what Surot techniques. His technique was the Surat Shab Yoga, which is called the sound current, where you turn into the primal sound current enchantless. This is called the sacred hue, which is pronounced hue, and it is a rolling tone that you keep on saying. And I have experienced this with thousands of people, and it is really very uplifting. And I have had incredible experiences using that technique. Another one that is more recent that I like very much comes from the Chinese esoteric school, the Hanmi Masters. This is the Buddhistic Chinese version. This is their leader, now deceased, but he was called the Dharma King Dzogchen Zhuiren, and also known as Yu Tianjian. And here their purpose is, like many Buddhist viewpoints, to enhance your spiritual transformation, increase your wisdom, but they also focus heavily on radiant health techniques through mantras, mudras, and guided meditations. And right now. Currently, I'm having a lot of success, to my great surprise and delight, with using these techniques. I'm almost to the end here, so bear with me. We'll have time for questions. The Robert Monroe Institute Hemisync technique has been around for a long, long time too. This is focusing on binaural beats, which are trying to help us put our brains in a whole brain state, because most of us are using one side or the other and not together in sync. So they're trying to achieve that through creating a frequency response in the electrical activity of the brain. So they produce these complex multi-layered audio signals. You'll put headphones on and you listen to these and you meditate and relax. And some people report some very extraordinary states of conscious awareness when they do it. I've used it and I like it very much as well, so I recommend it. Something I haven't tried, but that seems to be popular among young people in particular, is the Silva mind control. Of course, it is operating from the mind field, trying to train people to understand the different parts of their brain frequencies, from their ego to their dream states and beyond, and then be able to use them more effectively, particularly the theta state. So this is like Silva Mind Control 2.0. It was invented in 1960 by Jose Silva. Some of you probably have heard of it before. And like I say, to look down here at number 3, the theta level. This is the creative brainwave in us, some say. It's the state of meditation and deep sleep, which enables introspection, self-hypnosis, mind-body healing, creativity, and more. And I think this is a good thing to learn about, as well as, if you control this, learn how to reach these states within yourself. I think that's very helpful. And we've gone through some of that before. Creative visualization has been around a long time, starting with Shakti Gawain. I won't go into that. One offshoot here that is interesting is called lucid dreaming, or yoga nidra, I believe it's pronounced. And this is the state between awake and dreaming where you can control parts of your dream creatively. And when you do that, you can control some of the characteristics of it, environmental aspects, but not all of it. And you're able to, through this technique apparently, to access parts of the unconscious mind beyond what is normally known to access information. So that's pretty interesting. And a person who pioneered this is Stephen LaBerge. He came up with a creative workshop technique that I really liked a lot. So I'm going to go through this. We just have a few more slides to go, and then we can have questions and answers. But do this. Imagine an ideal workshop, an office suite, or what have you, or simply a room in your home. Envision the environment, the tools, the libraries, and etc., the furniture, things that you want in there that you can come back to time and time again. And enlist helpers in this room. It could be a guru, a Buddha, a spiritual guide, a mentor, or something of that nature to help you with whatever it is that you need assistance with. These can vary, I suppose. Then you build your dream to generate solutions or creative ideas, whatever it is. You phrase your intention or image, perhaps using the intention technique I told you, and incubate the dreaming. And wait. Now you're still awake of sorts, and you're working on this, okay? We do recommend that you devise a method to wake yourself up from the dream state. Some people have said, well, I put my arms up in the air, and when they fall down, I know I've fallen asleep and it wakes me up. Now, maybe there's a better method. 5 minutes on your alarm clock, maybe. I don't know. And whatever comes to mind, write it down and keep a journal of it and look for clues and answers. And repeat this over and over again. Repeating is very important, just like repeat meditations are important. In fact, you could meditate your dream or intention using this technique. Stephen LaBerge said it took him about a year before he actually started to get very good results from using this technique. So what would you like to dream up or connect or communicate with? Another technique in creative visualization is focusing on a single object. One might call this self-hypnosis, but perhaps not. This is one I like. It's called a 3D tesseract. This animation is available online. And if your mind looks at this continuously, your mind will get tired of trying to figure out how it works. And you may enter into a different state. This is how some people say they access the minimus, which is their word for the primordial source. Couple other things of note: remote viewing. Some people try that for communication by getting out of with their astral body, their mental body, or their soul body. And this is to gain information distant in time and space, shielded from our normal senses. This is principally done with the right side of the brain. And when you're in this state, you receive a signal line. Now, the government has done this in times past. I don't believe it's doing it anymore. They devised methods where they could verify the information. So it involved a chain of people assisting to receive, monitor, and analyze the results and so forth and give feedback. This technique does allow one to go beyond time and space. Space travel, for example, going back in the past, and some people have done it. And you can use it with other techniques such as maps, dowsing, binaural beats and tones, and so forth. All things to explore. And then finally here we have travelers of the far country, telling us we can soul travel in our soul bodies, which are basically light forms in a higher states of consciousness. The trick is bringing back the information. This is a high vibrational light body of unconditional loving beyond space and time. It is immortal with infinite knowledge, infinite energy, and its characteristics are purity, peace, love, joy, bliss, power, wisdom, and so on. Journeying out of the body can be achieved, and perhaps it's only gurus and yogis who have done it, but I think that everyday people can do this as well if they make it a goal and they work on it. And that's what it takes, work and practice. So in conclusion, I would like to say and remind you, I have tried to connect the dots here for you with my own interpretation of how I think energy works and works in our body. And I say that the universe is spiritual and consciousness is primary. It's not about materialism. That's just one aspect that it ends up being. And this is a transcendent field that is designed by an innate intelligence, a force, which you can probably never know. Harmonic resonance underlies a synchronized universe at all levels and scales. This consists of layers of light and sound wave structures. In fact, our bodies are light and wave structures. These structures form conscious dimensions, which can be described as phase coherent geometric arrays. Pardon me. Afterlife communication, psi phenomena, subtle energies are expressions of this transcendent field. We know that photons and electrons can communicate non-locally, so why can't we? Particles, waves, loops, whatever you want to call them, are light strings carrying encoded patterns of this primordial language on the information highway. And that all of us humans were built this way, possess the inherent potential to communicate to all levels of physical and spiritual consciousness. We just have to realize that, and we have to work on it to clear whatever we need to clear and practice it to get the results that I think might be surprising to some of us. And so I say, is there a possible eureka here? I don't know. For me, it has been to understand this from the quantum worlds into the physical body. So I now, at this time, am curious if anyone has questions or answers. That would be good.
Anybody?
Shall I stop share or stay here if we have to go back?
No, why don't you stop sharing?
Okay. Thank you for sticking with me.
And Jackie Monahan put a question in the chat early on in the presentation. She said, when you use the word quantum, how do you define it? What does it mean in this context?
Okay, the quantum world is the world of the very, very, very small. like I said, the smallest that we can imagine virtually is 10 to the minus 36 or 35. That's 35 zeros after it. That is one part of a tiny part of a meter, a micrometer. That is so small, we cannot see this with the naked eye. But there are some experiments, so it's the smallest of the small. Quantum is like quantum particles. These are particles that make up the particles of an atom, such as a proton or an electron or a neutron. And then these together make up atoms that compose all the rest of our physical world. Does that help to answer it?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, she wrote it in the chat.
Thank you for the question.
Okay.
Anyone else? Do you have questions, Gloria?
I might have a couple. Could you say a little bit more about Yoga Nidra?
Okay, this is the awake dreaming. This is where you can work yourself into an area where you're half awake and half dreaming. And as such, you can control your certain aspects of your dreaming, but not all. And when you do this, it can enable you to access information you might not normally be able to access from your subconscious, collective consciousness, or beyond. And that's what I know. And there are techniques for developing that.
Yeah, I
Lucid
have a
dreaming.
friend who teaches it, but I've never taken her class.
Okay. Well, that's what they try and show you how to do. It takes practice like some of these other techniques too. And Stephen LaBerge is the classical founder, I guess you could say, the original idea of that. So his book is a classic one, Lucid Dreaming. I highly recommend. She probably has that in her curriculum.
Yeah, that's what puzzled me because I had no idea that Yoga Nidra had anything to do with lucid dreaming.
It's just called that. It is not a person.
No, what do you mean a person? No, I'm saying I didn't know that Yoga Nidra had anything to do with lucid dreaming.
Okay, that was the depiction that I showed along with lucid dreaming. It was from, I could go back there, but it is from a book probably where he is sitting there dreaming. That's why his image is used. He's dreaming in the two worlds. If you were to go back and look at that illustration.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
Anybody?
Okay. Was it clear? Did it seem like a good idea?
Gloria?
Did you like
Yeah.
it?
I think Evan has a question.
I was just going to ask if, what other experiences have you had? You told us one of your experiences, and one of your friends' experiences as they were walking down the street and the light went on and off. What other experiences have you had that you could tell us that?
Okay. I have had a few, and the dramatic ones deal with the death of my parents. I will tell you that I was with my father at his side when he died, and this was 1994. I had wished that I could be there with him in his transitional period. And so I had gotten an inkling at 5 a.m. to go into his room. He died at home. And we had, angel people there who were helping the family adjust to this. He had cancer. And I got a nudge, and within 5 minutes, I was holding his hand. I actually saw him take his last breath. And as he exhaled, a blue globe of light emanated from his lips and rose up like this. And another one from his spiritual eye did the same thing. You have these two going, and they rose up in the air and they merged, and then they floated up to the ceiling and disappeared. That was one that I had, telling me that this was I imagine this was his soul body ascending. Then I had another one with my parents in which my mom deceased, and her death was in a hospital, and it wasn't the same. I expected, something similar to happen. It didn't. So my brother and his wife and I, we did our stuff that we had to do. And then I went home. And as I'm washing my face at the sink, and here I had a vanity that was an older home, had really heavy drawers on the side. And I had one pulled out, which I had my curlers and stuff in there. And it was still out. And you could balance it if you wanted to. So I'm washing my face. All of a sudden, I hear this bang, right? Something pressed down on this drawer and bounced back and startled me. And I turned around, and in my inner eye, I saw it was this cameo thing I told you about that had little, like a circle of clouds. This appeared in my inner vision, and inside it was light, and a younger version of my mother and my father together, because my mother would have sought my father on the other side. They were close. Behind them was a light body that looked like a kind of an individual that I think was accompanying them. And I said, Mom and Dad, you're here. I said it aloud. And they turned, their faces were facing me, and they turned and their mouths went, she can hear us. She knows we're here. That was pretty cool. And then I said my thing, oh, I love you and I hope I see you again and everything's all right and I'm glad you're fine. And then as if that was all that they needed to know, it just kind of the little cloud kind of faded back in like this, and that was all. But that was very comforting to me. And I mean, I don't know, I've had experiences where I had an entity visit me after chanting all day. These exercises, you can overdo it. I had an entity, a light entity, actually, that I couldn't even see, it was so bright, enter into my room at the foot of my bed, rev down into a face that is ingrained in my memory, actually, and proceeded to, it was a guide of some kind. We spoke telepathically. I was so amazed that I passed out in a swoon, and then I was taken out of my body. I remember this, and I was shown the lifetimes that I have lived on the earth plane. I still have a couple to go, by the way, but I was shown those, but I remember none of it. I only remember the first one. And as this was happening in this state, whatever it was, I kept saying to myself, I got to remember this when I wake up. But I only remembered the first one. And you wanted an amazing story? Okay, what I remembered was I was a little girl with my parents. We stepped off a cigar-shaped spaceship and it landed on Earth. We were refugees. That was my first life here. Now, this looked physical, but it probably wasn't. Okay, so I remember this. And then afterwards, when I wake up in the morning, I'm high as a kite. And I go into the bathroom and look at the mirror. I'm getting ready for work. And when I look at the mirror, I see all these sparkly little lights all around me. And I turn around and I look, there's nothing there. This is coming from my inner consciousness projected outward. I will reveal to you that I was high for 2 weeks. I couldn't work very well. I couldn't function. I was spiritually intoxicated. And I had to ask the universe to rev me down because I couldn't function. And so after a couple of days, I revved down back to normal, which was fine. But you wanted experiences? There you go. Or I can tell you that I've been with individuals that have done phenomenal things. That sitting in a room, the room above, and I've written about these, I haven't published anything. This particular individual was like a wizard. This is a paranormal experience, right? He used to come in and throw his change from his pockets on the floor. So we're down below one day, everything's normal, watching television. All of a sudden, he made it rain money on top of me. He was able to transmute real objects into a phase where it fell through another physical object on top of me. I grabbed it, there was real money. It wasn't just an illusion. I was like flabbergasted. That's just one of many things that he could do, I'll tell you. That was quite an experience being with this individual.
Did it last?
Huh?
Did it last? Did the money last, or did it?
Oh, no, the money was real. It was real money to start with. up
Yeah.
on the floor where he'd thrown it, came down through the
Right.
ceiling on top of me and around me, gathered it up. It was real money.
So it didn't fade away.
Made it move through the wall, so the floor. So I could go on and on for hours with a few experiences like that. Is that sufficient? Does
Mhm.
that help a lot?
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. That enlightens and gives vibration to your whole presentation. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
well, thank you. I mean, what I presented is very theoretical in some ways. To me, it is very real. I have looked at this for 15 years and come to this conclusion about vibrations and the fact that our science does not acknowledge consciousness as a legitimate form of study. So it can look at the quantum world and quantum information science, and they're going, in the direction of artificial intelligence, but they're not doing the other work that takes us into the realm of the unknown and start to study it by back engineering and the like. Now, I had a focus to this particular topic, but I am also prepared to start talking about, in technical terms, this real process from the primordial light and sound, so to speak, dark light, as it travels, because I've looked at aspects of this, like characteristics. It's like a language. And then what's the process? And then as, like, for example, these particles spin at an angular momentum, most of them. Some of the subatomic particles do not, but most of them are spinning really fast like this at an angle. And what does that produce? And then on to the next step, and then document that, and on it goes. And I think that we can imagine, based on what we know already about the physical world, the quantum world, quantum mechanical world, the world of atoms, the particles, and then on. I think that we can speculate on some rather reasonable ideas about how it works, because what I've noticed is the quantum world and the physical world and the cosmic world all are patterns. It's happening on all scales. Okay, so what we see out in the cosmos, I took out one picture that was a picture of the plasmic, they're called Birkeland currents that connect up the universe. Okay, they're electromagnetic plasmic currents. They come together in bunches and they form they're the beginnings of stars, star nodes, and they become real stars that go through their own process. And this is happening everywhere. The pattern is the same with neurons in the brain. Everything is like a pattern that is repeated, but on a grander scale. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Microcosm, microcosm.
Yep.
Mhm. I was listening yesterday to an interview, it's more of a presentation really, by a man who I had never heard of before. This was on Buddha at the gas pump. His name is Ray Hernandez.
Okay.
And he was talking about UFO experiences and the paranormal. It was really, I have to listen to it again because I was kind of dozing off. It was late at night and I was pretty sleepy, but it was very interesting because I've always felt that there was a lot of overlap between people who talk about, seeing aliens and abductions and that kind of thing, and spirit manifestation. And he was definitely saying that, he's written a book on this, which I haven't seen yet, but yeah, I really liked where he was coming from. And he was talking about how these things are all connected, and, the paranormal experiences, spirit communication, afterlife communication, and UFO phenomena. So have you come across any of that? I've been waiting to hear somebody, talk about this. And he quoted a number of other people who are writing about this and
Okay.
talking about this, and I'm excited about that. I'm going to see if I can contact him and see if I can get him to present.
Well, that would be a good idea. Well, across the universe, there are universals, but there are also different things too. Other kinds of beings, other kinds of principles on which they operate. Maybe they're breathing methane instead of oxygen, and maybe they're in insectoid form, and they're all tapping into the one primordial source of information that's expressing itself differently. On this planet, we have all kinds of individuals coming here. This is a learning ground, and they're at all levels of unfoldment. And there are people here at this time and space. I think we could all agree that we're in a transitory space, and we wish it was better. And we're just kind of in the throes of, the change and all this. So, so they've come here to assist and to help unfold. And we're all actually helping one another all of the time. So there are some people who are so unfolded that they can actually see entities and speak with them and so forth, and they're doing their job. You could call it a projection, but I call it synchronicity. I call it, synchronization is better. That they're able, their vibratory rates are able to see these things that are real.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget though that we can also create them.
Mm-hmm.
We can create these experiences too. I think most people are receiving them though at this time.
Well, it reminded me when you were talking about having that vision of you and your parents coming off of a spaceship or something.
Oh yeah, this is my first recollection of my first life on this planet.
Yeah,
I'm one that's been many, many, many places.
Mm-hmm.
This is just, you go in cycles of lives.
Yeah,
in different places.
Literature says that most of us who are on this planet, it is not the first planet we've incarnated on, because there are planets that are even lower than Earth.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, Earth is one of the lower ones, but it's not the lowest.
Yes.
So we graduate from one to another as we grow.
But also, I think part of the spiritual journey, in my opinion, is to spiritualize the physical.
Oh, yes.
Enjoy what the physical life has to offer and spiritualize it from the planes above with your knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
To actually have a joyful life and a creative life, mm-hmm. an abundant life, all those good things that we want. Mm-hmm. And I think the more that we can reach into those realms, the more that we can, as one say, burn off our karma or manage it, because you're always going to do it. When you're awake and you're alive, you're going to have negative and positives happening in life, but you manage it. And then I think that's the balance that we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't know, I think that's our goal, really, when all is said and done.
Mm-hmm. Natalie is saying, thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. And Jackie also said, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm so glad that you were here and enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Anybody else have a question? We'll have some.
Or just conversation is fine.
Yeah.
As we
just want to make sure nobody's waiting to ask a question.
Okay.
Another thing that I found intriguing was I've done a number of workshops and stuff on remote viewing, but I've never heard of someone visiting the past with remote viewing. At least, I don't remember hearing about that. Can you say any more about that? Or
I can tell one instance that comes to mind. There was a photograph that showed an individual. The photograph was taken during the Civil War, and it shows a group of people walking along, and this individual was photographed then, and he had gone back in time. Someone had taken a photograph and he was included in it. They go back to find out what really happened. Mm-hmm. And there is a danger in interfering with the past and making a change that could make a difference. And there are people who've gone into the future, certainly. We have examples of that, like Al Bielek. You probably heard that story before from the Philadelphia experiment. You don't know that
What experiment? I'm sorry, the what experiment?
His name is Al Bielek.
Okay.
And he and his brother were on the Eldridge, which was part of the Philadelphia experiment, in which they were looking to cloak the ship so that it wouldn't be detectable by the German radar. And they used, Einstein was involved, Nikola Tesla was involved, other people were involved in this, and it was like an experiment gone wrong. They made the ship disappear. It reappeared in Norfolk, off Norfolk, Virginia, and then they made it come back. When they made it come back, they used electrical Tesla coils, I believe, and Nikola Tesla himself, as the story goes, from Al Bielek, who has talked about this. He's deceased now, but apparently Tesla said, you can't do this. This is going to have bad effects. When you make something, rev something to the point where it disappears physically, and then you bring it back and make it reappear, well, things weren't where they were in the beginning. And several individuals were actually embedded in the steel and so on. It was a tragedy. But Al Bielek and his brother, apparently they recognized what was happening and they jumped off the ship. When they jumped off the ship, they went back in time. Oh no, they went back into the future, back to the future. And they had adventures there. And in fact, he had several adventures. And he says he was brought back. He knew too much. He remembered too much. And that some people in probably a Black project, right? This sounds fantastic. The story goes, as he tells it, he was, his soul was taken out of his body and inserted into an infant, and he became Al Bielek. Prior to that, he was Edward Cameron or something like that. And he went on and they sent him into the future again. It's like this, folks. There's a guy named, what was his name? Rich something, Al Rich. He worked for Lockheed. And there's projects going on all the time with the government we don't know about. And what he said on his deathbed was really important. He said, anything you can imagine we already know how to do, but it would take an act of God to make it available to the public. Probably, you see, there's so many different kinds of entities here and some who don't love us, that we don't want certain information to get out. But
I think
they know how to do a lot of kinds of things. I don't have details. I just hear stories from other people. They know how to take us into the future and look and into the past if they want to. And there are probably some rules and principles involved in that. And they can go to the moon, they can go to Mars, they can go anywhere they want. And, there's a bigger picture that we as civilians are not aware of, I do believe. That's probably another subject and maybe one that, we don't want to record. But anyway, Al Bielek's story's out there on YouTube. You can listen to some of his interviews, and I've listened to some original ones, 4 hours long, which is an incredible story of his life. And I tend to believe that.
How do you spell his last name?
Bielek, Bielek, I believe. Bielek, could be EK. Al Bielek. You could search for that and future. Put the word future there. He was taken several thousand years into the future and shown what it was like. And humans survived, and they were also dependent on high technology. They had all sorts of things. And he's not the only one that talks about that. There are people who are, they're able to take an assignment where they're taken somewhere, they work for 20 years, and then they come back, and then they're what shall I say, debriefed, and then they erase their memories and back to where they were when they started. You believe this is possible? That's what some people are telling us is their story. And that's out there too.
Yeah.
What are we listening to? It's a world, it's unfamiliar a bit, but it's all certainly possible. But what is important is not necessarily go there. What's important to me is to realize what exists already within us, as I have tried to describe this evening. We have access to virtually anything, but we're going to have to work for it. We're going to have to give credit to our own bodies that have been created by marvelous beings, that we have the ability to do this and recognize. And I think recognizing those abilities are what is holding back humanity in general. We've all been given a different picture of who and what we are. And we're awakening now. And groups like Follow Caritas and others, these are people, they're us going, I think there's something more. Tell me, what do you know? You know what I mean? So it's great to have this kind of sharing through your project, Gloria.
You've heard of Brian Weiss, who wrote Many Lives, Many Masters. Someone told me, and I think I bought the book, but I haven't read it yet, that that book was about his experiences with regressing people into past lives. And someone told me that this other book that he wrote, where he was progressing people into future lives. Again, I haven't read it, so I can't say much about it. But what she told me was that one of the things that a lot of these subjects said about, going into the future was that there was less technology. And I thought that was interesting because to me, it conjures up two possibilities. One is that we don't need technology as much, outer technology, because our inner technology would be more developed. In other words,
that makes sense. But remember, what I said to you may be a point in time where we're still using technology, but later as we unfold some more as a species, then maybe we're able to manifest what we need. That would be even further into the future, probably.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's a lovely idea.
No, I read his books more about the regression, not about the future. I found it very interesting because he was concerned about his professional reputation when at least the foreword of the book indicated that. But I also have a question for Suzanne that I've been thinking about. I was partially interested in this topic because my mother passed away in April, and I was with my siblings when we were all with my father when he passed away about 20 years ago. And we were present when he took his last breath. And that was a very important time for us. I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 of us. 2 siblings were present when my mom passed, but myself and the other one were not. And I did speak to a hospice nurse about this, who is also a chaplain. But my question right now is, so I've been looking for signs of my mother and don't think that I've experienced them, but I would be interested in learning how maybe to develop a better sense of how maybe increase my vibrational ability. I'm not maybe using the right terms, but I'm wondering if Suzanne has anything to say about that.
Well, I've given you several methods that I like in my talk. What are you attracted to? I think some form of meditation would be helpful, because I couldn't begin to analyze where you are to be more specific than that. But I would recommend whatever you're attracted to, that you try that and see how that works. And use intentioning. Send out to the universe that you'd like to communicate with her and really work on that. You're sending out a signal and a vibration, you see, and do that continuously. You might try the creative workshop or office or room where you go each time and you set the intention that you want to communicate with mom. And then maybe you're using some meditation techniques as you do this, and then just keep on doing it. And you may be surprised what comes back to you. It may come through an advertisement. It may come through something else that clicks and you realize, oh, that's mom speaking through this kind of thing. It could be direct or it could be indirect. There's no way of telling, but that's what I would recommend. Go with your own inner senses on what may work for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have you had any dreams about her? Has she come to you in your dreams at all?
I don't think so, but I have friends who have very vivid and memorable and strong dreams about things in their life, and they're always analyzing them, it seems, about what they might mean. Dreaming isn't something that has ever been prominent in my life, so I'm not expecting it to happen in a dream, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't. But I think I'm trying to figure out right now, I think because both of my parents are gone, how I can make a higher or a stronger connection. And because I believe it happens. And I've had other experiences along the way, not necessarily with my mom, but before my mom passed, with other people passing. But I think I'm at a point in my life where I'd like to develop a greater vibrational sense. And, I think part of it is like anything else we face that's something new or different is how to be successful at it. I think what Suzanne said about, we hold ourselves back, I think sometimes in life. So part of my seeking this or questioning this is, can I do it, and how would that take shape?
You might try writing. Spirits can have an easier time contacting us through dreams because we don't have so many filters up when we're asleep, And so
True.
Dreaming, that's why I asked you, because dreaming sometimes, and you may have contacted her in your dream, in your sleep, and not remembered it when you woke up. That's a very distinct possibility also.
Yes. Yes, working on remembering new dreams would be very important, yes. If you can read up on that, how to remember your dreams. Just research that online and see what you come up with. You might get some good ideas.
Yeah.
I know that. Well, I'll just add to that. I know that Gloria teaches dream work, and I teach dream work as well. And I've had clients that have had incredible connections with their parents through dreams, or with other individuals that have been very important in their life, and they wanted to reconnect. So dream work is a real easy way and a brilliant way to reconnect, and to also help yourself out with all sorts of information, and help you set goals, help you to see how life could be for you. So I think dream work is a very, very excellent place to start.
Yeah, and another thing that we do sometimes is just asking a question in writing directed at either your guide, your spirit guide. We all have, kind of a guardian angel type entity in our lives, or your mom, and just see what comes.
When you write it, for an example, people who have done that, when you write it, do you keep the physical written question somewhere, or do you eventually discard it? I mean,
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
Doesn't matter. What matters is your intention, and what are your intentions in terms of communicating? Because if it's frivolous, then you could attract a frivolous spirit who's just trying to deceive you. But if it's serious and, you're just reaching out of love and, just wanting to know that they're okay, I think that's a possibility you might try.
I think, I am no longer married, so I'm not, I don't have attachment to a spouse in the same kind of, maybe vibrational way that someone who's been married for a long time. But what I'm recognizing now that both of my parents are gone is that almost regardless of what happened while everyone was alive, because you go through periods of more attachment or less attachment depending on what's going on in life. It seemed, your parents bring you here. And so that attachment is undeniable in my mind. And so I find this, it's like a quest that I can't stop thinking about, is how to reconnect with them, even though their physical presence isn't here. I'm, I can't get it off my mind that I want to connect another way because they're my parents,
I would like to just mention that it takes two. Now, it could be that your parents are existing on a much higher vibratory rate. They're not getting your signal. It's because what they would have to do to communicate with you is find the meeting ground. That's the synchronization, where they're revving down in order to communicate with you, and you're raising up in order to do the same. And so that's kind of hard to calculate. But like, for example, with my dad and mom, I don't communicate with them regularly. Maybe a dream once in a very long while. But even if I think of them, these entities are going on. They're not staying still. They're continuing, like we're going, moving on. And so it's not that they wouldn't want to communicate with you, but time and space are different in these arenas. So time doesn't exist. You're going to be there in the next second, so to speak, or whatever. So they're not getting the signal through. That's just the point. And when I told you the story about Lindsay, my deceased husband, was trying to communicate all these different ways with me, and I didn't get it because I was trying to telepathically do it with my brain. And what he needed to hear was from my lips, because he was revving down into the physical to make these manifestations. And that was the arena in which he wanted to communicate. And then when I did, the communication stopped because he got what he needed. The message came through. See what I mean? So I would, on second thought, I think I'd really work on my intentioning and strengthening my desire passionately to do this with them, and use other techniques to make yourself open and aware, and just send them the signal and ask them, would you please acknowledge this? It's kind of like sending a text. Oh, we're going to change lunchtime to 12:30 instead of 12. Would you please acknowledge that? Yeah, it's true. Ask them because they may hear you. They may have been hearing you forever. And then they go, well, she didn't ask us to respond.
I'd like to add one thing. Gloria tells a story about doing energy healing and how people who come in to be healed through energetics, even though they're there, and even though they say that they want to be healed, when the energy is projected at them, it bounces off because they're closed. And I think it's very important to add to the intention actually being open to receive communication from the other side. So many people harbor fears. So many people are not ready to actually experience that communication. So intention is incredibly important. And then you have to be open. You have to allow the energy to be present and accept that. So think about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, good
That-
point. Good point.
Good, very good point. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and one of the things that I teach is Spiritism 101, and I'll be starting a new class in January. And if you're interested, you'll learn a lot about all this stuff in that class.
Sounds good.
Watch for the flyer if you're on our email list.
I
Or you-
am.
Or you can see it on the website. Yeah, that's a fascinating study.
I see there's a calendar on the website. I'm sure that these will all be there, all
Mhm.
these courses. Okay.
Yes. So I guess we're pretty much out of time at this point. But I want to thank Suzanne for giving us all the time and information. And because there was so much information and it was so quickly, just the time went so quickly. Anybody who would like a copy of the video to go through it again more slowly, just let me know and I'll send it to you when it's ready. Should be ready within a week or two. And December 9th, we have Amit Goswami. I don't know how many of you have heard of him, but he's quite well-known theoretical physicist who also likes to converge science and spirituality, and he's a wonderful speaker. So look for that. And thank you all for attending.
And I would like to just say thank you, Gloria, and thank all of you for being here to share with me. It's been a pleasure.